Good afternoon, everyone. This is Tulio Suragusa with Dojo Live. Today is Thursday, July 16th, 2020. Welcome to another episode. I am joined today by my co-host, Carlos Ponce, just outside of Mexico City. I'm broadcasting from Los Angeles. Welcome, Carlos. Here we go, one
Thank
more
you,
time.
Tulio. One more time, Tulio.
We have Sammy James, who is the CEO and lead strategist at Speak2leads. And I'm looking forward to our conversation today. He's picked an interesting topic, which we're going to introduce in just a few minutes. But before we go into that, Sammy, please introduce yourself. Give us a little bit of background about you, anything interesting you'd like to share with the audience.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having me. I am a entrepreneur, a founder and CEO of a company that has been in business for over 10 years now. We started January 2010, and so 10 and a half years. And it's called Speak2leads. I like international. That's why I like you guys. I called the company S2L International legally because I just had to have that word international in my vocabulary. Because I grew up when I was very young. I was fortunate enough to be shipped off to Italy when I was 6 years old, and I was born in Virginia, but moved to Italy, and then from that point on, that's when I became international. And what I mean by that is, I just have a very wide. I think the whole world is an option, and it's that's the playground as far as I'm concerned. So we're doing everything we can to help clients both in the United States, Canada, and around the world, and that's pretty much a quick summary of my background.
Thanks, Sammy. Appreciate it. Sounds like we have some similarities. I did the opposite of what you did. You went to Italy. I came from there. So awesome.
Okay.
We switched sides. So great. Thanks for introducing yourself. Tell us a little bit about Speak2leads. What gave birth to this idea? What's the business all about? And please introduce the company.
Yeah, my background that led to Speak2leads, I started out my dad was a disc jockey when I was born. So and that was a big thing back in those days. Radio was still a big thing. And then I eventually got into radio myself and moved to Canada to do that, actually. And I went from radio into the advertising business, learned that business, worked on the agency side, the client side, and then early on was introduced to technology because one of my clients was a technology client. And this was back when people really didn't even know what a computer was. They were like, unless you were a big company, but small companies did not. And so cutting my teeth early on and trying to help people understand what technology was and how they could use it to speed up their business and become more efficient and effective and all that. Very exciting to me. I love what's next, and so as it turns out, throughout my career, I've always been involved in either advertising, marketing, media, or technology with a common thread through all of that. And I spent most of my life in San Francisco, actually. Consider that to be pretty much my hometown, and about 20 years there. And I worked for a lot of startups back in the first era of the .com era, where there was a lot of venture capital available, and worked in a variety of different technologies, and a couple of different ones involved telephony matching up with databases, and then one was what I would call like a first generation Shazam. So before smartphones, there were the dumb phones, I guess. They didn't do anything. You could make a phone call. That was pretty much it. I think you could send some sort of MMS message. I don't remember. Anyway, so what you would have to do to hear the name of a song, because that was still a problem even back then, that was playing on the radio, is call an 800 number, type in the frequency of the station you're listening to now, 1045 KFOG, San Francisco. Here's what's playing now. We'll play you the snippet. Is that the song you're looking for? Yes, no, go back, go forward. And that was Shazam. So as we know it today, right? And so when I ended up in San Diego, because I had clients down there and it took me there a few different times, I ended up just being lazy and just saying, I'm just going to stay because the weather's pretty darn nice in San Diego. So why not? And when I was running a agency again, I had two categories. I had an agency for education, for higher education, and an agency for general business. And the higher education agency was called Get Starts. The clients, this is about this is 13, 14, 15 years ago. This is shortly after the advent of Google with search. And so people were starting to search for, in this case, let's say education, going back to school, getting a degree in something, and they were filling out forms. And so forms quickly started to take over and become a fairly dominant way or channel for people to inquire about the school, as opposed to picking up the phone and responding to a direct response TV ad, which is, which largely what people were doing back then, still do today, I suppose. And the problem was that the admissions representatives, aka salespeople, didn't like these leads. They found them difficult to get in touch with. They thought that they weren't qualified. And I was like thinking, well, that doesn't make any sense, because these people are not impulse buyers. They're doing research. They're putting time in. They're making an effort to actually, do their homework, to look for schools, and then filling out a form. I mean, they're involved, right? And I'm thinking to myself, they are more qualified than someone who's sitting on a couch calling an 800 number, from a TV spot as they watch a soap opera. So I thought that's crazy. So then I just, okay, let me think about it. I see the problem is your salespeople are not calling these leads, and I also knew, because of my background in the, using what's playing on the radio right now, people want to know things now, and they want, it's a fleeting impulse in a way. Yes, it is. And it doesn't last very long. And I knew that too. So, but that's just basic marketing. I mean, everyone should know that. So I said, okay, why can't we just connect that form to a phone call? Why can't we just take, when someone submits the form, in the background, we convert that data, that text data, into a speech to text, and dial the rep and tell them they have a lead and who it is, and tell them to press 2 to call the lead. I mean, just do their job for them. Why can't we do that? And this is how my mind thinks, because I don't want to know too much about technology. I'm not a developer, thank goodness, because if I was, or if I was an engineer, or if I was, in other words, smart like that, I would be very limited, I think, in the way my brain works. So I have the ability to think more abstractly and think about possibilities, even though it sounds crazy. And I want to stay crazy as long as possible.
Well, Sammy, that's a interesting evolution on how you got to your company. Let's go right into the topic you've chosen today. Carlos, please introduce the show, and let's dig in a little bit more, because I want to learn some more. Thanks, Sammy.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tulio, and thanks our guest, Sammy James. We are going to be talking about what Sammy has called the squiggly path to success, right? So in other words, he's going to be elaborating on 10 years of failures, fear, and finding our way. So that's the topic. So first question that I have for you, Sammy, is the squiggly path to success. Why the name? Where does it come from? Why did you think it would make an interesting topic for today's conversation? Thank you.
Sure. Well, I think, what I'm hoping here is that I can hopefully shed some light or share my experience to help encourage people not to be too discouraged by not being successful yet, or if they're just starting out on some entrepreneurial path, to not be discouraged when success doesn't come right away. And they have people saying, and you hear this all the time, people will say, that's not a good idea. I mean, all the naysayers and all that. But you have to, obviously, to be an entrepreneur, you already have enough conviction and belief in yourself, enough, maybe not as much as other people, but you have enough to be able to ignore those negative signals. But I've always, I've got bad habits like a lot of other people do too. I hope I'm not the only one, which I compare myself to other people. I see other podcasts or webinars or go to conferences, and the people that are speaking, they're super successful. And they ran these companies, and they grew them up to like, multi-million dollars in annual revenue. And then they sold them for big multiples, and they've exited this, and they've exited, and it just sounds amazing. And I'm so impressed with those people because I know how hard it is to succeed. And I always think, well, I must be doing something wrong because I'm not there yet. And I decided a long time ago, as long as I believe in what I'm doing and I believe it's useful and I believe it's helpful, I'm motivated by that. I'm motivated by my belief in what I'm providing. And the belief comes from my clients telling me that it works. So it's been, all I'm saying is that I've tried a lot of different things over the 10 years and still survived and made a living, along the way. And still have a high hopes for my company being super successful and being that guy who says, yeah, I exited my company and, for a lot of, big 8-figure number. And I want to be that guy still, but I'm not that guy yet. Okay. I'm still working on it 10.5 years later and thinking right now closer than ever. Because, and the reality is very few people have ever heard of Speak2leads to this day.
So, Sammy, this is an interesting topic and very timely. A lot of folks went through quite a journey from 2008, 2009, the last time we had a pretty major financial impact. And many say it's been a 10-year plus journey recovering from that. Yours right here included. So, for a lot of folks who are unfortunately facing that right now because of COVID, they're literally facing some similar challenges, if not even potentially worse challenges. What were some of the things that kept you sort of anchored when it got really hard? How did you find it to keep going? Your topic is 10 years of failures, fear, and finding our way. How did you find your way when it felt like there was no way?
Well, I think one of those ways, is exercise, believe it or not. I got into CrossFit, and that really saved me because when you're physically strong, you're mentally strong. It does make your constitution a little bit stronger. So when you're when you're facing your fear, something like, it looks and feels like you might be going out of business, or you're in big trouble, or whatever the case may be. The physiological reaction to that is just somewhat, better when you're physically fit. And I get, I don't know, so that helped me. It helps relieve a lot of stress, right? In exercise. So exercise was number one, and, and just physically taking care of myself and eating well and things like that. And then I would say a glass of wine would be number two. Because I'm telling you, yeah, or beer. But it's like, man, it gets really scary, sometimes. But I also love the fear. So I have to admit, like when I was very young, I was the first guy up on stage. I was in every live theatrical event possible because of that fear of being exposed in front of everyone. I loved that risk, so shut the window. So anyway, so I you have to have some kind of capacity, or for that kind of risk, I guess. But doesn't mean you don't feel the fear, and I'm sure you've read the book or heard the book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And that's kind of like the code I live by. But thankfully, what would happen is just in time, it's like a client would say, hey, by the way, I want to tell you that, because we're using your product, our sales are really doing, so much better. And thank goodness for, what you're doing. I really appreciate it. I hear the positive feedback, and that is fuel for me. That is, I can live on those vapors for a long time, just to hear that genuine, appreciation. Because my goal as someone in business, no matter what role I'm in, whether I'm a salesman or a founder, it doesn't matter. I want people to appreciate me. That's my neurosis. I always say, take your neurosis and use it as your strength. And so I feed off my neurosis, which is wanting to be appreciated. So, okay, because I've seen it happen. I've worked for companies, like I worked for a radio station in Los Angeles, and these guys make a lot of money. And I come in to give them some new, gizmo. And they're like, okay, well, we'll see. And, a lot of doubt and skepticism. But then all of a sudden, when the money starts pouring in, I'm changing their life because they're making a lot of money and being very successful. Guess how they perceive me personally? They now think I'm a great guy. Okay, I had to buy that appreciation. I had to earn it, but you know what? It still feels good. I don't mind.
Absolutely.
And that's all it is. That's all it is. That's my
So
motivation.
let me see if I can recap what I heard, Sammy. I heard, taking care of yourself when things get hard is important, because that helps you develop grit, which is really about not only perseverance, but having the courage to go through the difficult times. The second thing I heard is, in your case, find a way to relax, whether it's having a glass of wine or meditating or whatever works for each individual. Find a way to unwind, to disconnect. So, chime in, be all in, taking care of yourself, but also make time to disconnect, which is kind of hard for a lot of people when they're finding themselves challenged. Basically to survive in some cases. It's very hard to say, I don't want to make time for myself to relax, but it's an important aspect to keep on going. Carlos, I know you had some follow-up questions.
Yeah. Thank you, Tulio, so much. Sammy, I'm listening to what you say, and you're telling us about 10 years of lessons and quite a journey, so to speak. I would like to ask you, I'm looking at the information that you kindly shared with us. You shared with us, and you talked about how you get involved with the first social media bookmarking site, the first song recognition application, the pre-Shazam kind of thing. And so there's a lot of concepts here. What would you say to those people who, in this day, especially in this day and age, that they don't want to be the anything. They want to be the next thing. They want to be the next Facebook, the next Instagram, the next Amazon. Personally, I wouldn't like to go that way as an entrepreneur. But I'm sure that, and I know that there are a lot of people out there who think like this. I want to be the next this, the next that. What would you say to these people who have this mindset of grandeur, so to speak?
Well, nothing wrong with that. I don't want to be that. I want enough to be able to take care of my family and live a nice life and have some options and freedom and basically own my time, so I can spend it how I want. That's freedom. That's success to me. So I don't need a big yacht and maybe a little one, or I don't know. Better to have a friend who has a yacht. Anyway. So I think that for me, actually, when I set out, I wanted it to be big too, but I was too early. And all those firsts, every one of them was too early because I'm an early adopter. So I gravitate towards things early. And that's, again, your strength is your weakness in this case, because it turned out it worked against me a little bit. And now it's worked for me with Speak2leads because I made a conscious decision. I'm early to the party here on this, it turns out, because nobody else is doing it except me. I was the only one. And I thought that, that's not good. Why isn't anybody else doing this? But I stuck to my guns, and I said, you know what? I'm going to stay with this, and I'm going to persevere and do it as long as it's valuable to people, and as long as it's valuable, and I think there's potential to grow it and expand it, and then that's motivating for me. That's all the motivation I need. So. If but you've got to believe. Conviction is 90% of persuasion. The other is just authenticity, which is, conviction is authenticity. So what do you believe in? And what problem do you want to solve? Because really, it's not, people don't look for solutions because they don't know what the solution. I'm discovering this about my own product right now. No one's searching for my product because they don't know it exists, right? What they do know is they have a problem. And the problem I'm solving is they're not closing enough sales, they're making an inbound lead investment and they would like to close more sales. That's the problem. And my product solves that. So if they're looking, to solve that problem, I can help them. So really focus on what problem you're solving, what problem you want to solve, what's the problem you get excited about solving. And it can be anything from a new yoga mat to something really very techy. It can be anything.
So Sammy, what have what have been some of the effective ways you've learned in the past decade on, when you're doing a disruption, something no one's ever done, there's a lot of education that goes into it. There's a process to help organizations see why they should change what they've invested in for many, many years, whether it's working or not. People get used to doing a certain thing, and the minute you introduce something radically different, it's a big challenge to get adoption. What have been some of the things you've learned that has worked to get through that hurdle? Something that perhaps other entrepreneurs can glean from your experience.
Look for someone who will give you a champion, someone who's a client who's willing to take a risk. You've got to find someone who believes in what you're doing or is willing to go, okay, it sounds a little weird and funny, but I'll try it. And they're willing to work with you. And of course, you give them a break, and all that. But that's what you need. You got to have somebody and you got to earn your way forward. And then you figure things out with that type of client. And then, next thing you know, okay, now you've got a little bit of a story. You've got your bugs, most of the kinks worked out, or at least the big ones. And then now you go to the next client. And you've got to, so start with clients that are easy to work with, that are willing and open to being flexible and allowing you to make some mistakes. Don't start off talking to the top guys. Just start small. Yeah.
Okay, so there's been a myriad of books written about early adopters, the importance of early adopters, especially if you're disrupting. But how do you figure out how have you gone through the process of figuring out who that person is? Are there some key things you ask to identify whether someone has a propensity to take a risk versus someone who doesn't? Because you've got a pretty big universe of people to reach out to, right? You're solving a problem, and companies that are struggling with that. But how do you reach the right person who has the propensity to want to take that risk? How do you figure that out? What did you learn?
Well, sometimes one thing, you just look for people who are typically they you can tell if they're innovative. You can tell by what tech stack they use or what their profile. I mean, you can tell if they're that they're forward thinking. It's kind of obvious. And if it's not, when you speak to them, you'll know when real fast. I mean, so so you've got to, sometimes you don't know, and you just have to speak to them. And then from that conversation, you'll learn real fast how willing they are to try something new. And that's really, finding those early adopters is important. And people that are willing to sample what you're doing. And it just depends on the category or how technical it is, my thing was bootstrapped. It wasn't, it was, there was a lot less risk than there might be if somebody's raising a lot of millions of dollars to go build something. And I don't know. So yeah, I just did it organically, and I just knew certain people that were, and I was fortunate because I had a business already. I had an advertising business, and I knew of those clients. I knew some of my clients personally now. So I knew which ones were more open to ideas. So I talked to them first.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you make. It's a lot easier to discover those things today than it was even just 20 years ago. I mean, dating back 25, 30 years ago, I remember we didn't have the internet to go search and see we didn't have social media. We didn't know what anyone was doing. Nothing was visible. So I couldn't figure out if the person had a propensity to be an early adopter. None of that was possible. So it was a lot more work. Today, there's technology to do that. So great advice. Use what's out there to your advantage.
But come on, if someone's using AOL as their email address, they're not an early adopter.
Exactly. So let's talk a little bit about Speak2leads a little bit more. What's the target market for you for that business? What's the sweet spot market client, if you will, for what you're doing?
It is people that measure what they're doing. First of all, the people who measure. So, for example, if they are investing a certain amount in inbound leads, through various channels, whether it be Facebook or paid search, Google AdWords, etc., and or third-party lead providers, and these leads are coming in, they're measuring the conversion of those leads all the way through, through the I don't know if you call it a funnel, but through the process, the sales process. And they care about the return on their investment. They know what it is, and they know what it is by source. So they have a propensity for measuring things, which is great. Number two, they probably have a fairly high average revenue per customer. So they're selling something considered, purchase or complex sale, and it probably has a significant amount. It costs, probably, 500, 5,000, whatever per month or something like this, or per sale or something more. And those two things make great clients for us. And the third would be that they do generate significant a number of leads. I mean, we have clients as small as 100 leads a month. We have clients that do 10,000 leads a month. So anywhere in there is okay. I mean, we'd obviously rather have bigger clients because it's less work, because it's almost the same amount of work for us to maintain a smaller client than it is a big one. But that's really what makes a great client for us. We have clients that have been with us for 10 years. Guys like Optima Tax is like since they started. We were the differentiator. The COO there told me that when they started, there was a lot of competition back in 2010, or I think it was, and of course, like you said, the market was not good, and he was a visionary, and so he was looking for a solution to help increase the speed that his salespeople were speaking to their leads, because that's the number one driver of conversions when it comes to sales. And he reached out and found us, and it worked. So they're still a client today, and a great one. So that would be an example. But we work with clients, all over the world. One of the limitations we have was we also are a telephony. We sit on top of Twilio, our application. So Twilio charges us money for mobile calls. Mobile calls cost a lot of money in Brazil, for example. So more than they do in the United States. So that means the cost we have to charge is a little bit higher internationally. But it can still be affordable as long as the mobile rates aren't crazy, which in some countries they are. So that's cost prohibitive in a way.
Great, thanks for sharing that with us. Sounds like a lot of studies have been done that show 70% of the failed opportunities just come from simply not following up. Salespeople just not following up. So if you created a tool and a process where it does a lot of the heavy lifting, and all they have to do is just take a call and respond, and they got all the information, you're doing the work for them. To me, it sounds like that particular problem gets resolved pretty quickly, because you're not necessarily counting on people to manage their time and be, not everybody's as organized as some others. So this, it sounds to me, helps individuals and companies create an environment where everyone is organized and everyone is consistently following up.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on time, Sammy. I want to just see if we can wrap it up with what's next. Where are you heading next with this solution, and any words of wisdom you want to share finally with everybody else here in terms of your journey?
Well, I'm blowing everything up again, and I'm starting again. I mean, I'm redoing the whole product. The engine's still the same, but the reporting, the settings, the dashboard, some new features, a new website, So I'm starting again. I mean, because it's 10 years old, and so it's time to modernize, time to to remain competitive and remain relevant. It's important. So I have to look at myself like a new product, like I'm the new guy, and I'm the new guy again. I'm going to be my next competitor. So that's what I'm up to now, is I want to blow myself out of the water. Okay. And that's what I did 10 years ago. I'm going to do it now again. So that's what's going on now. I'm reading April Dunsworth. I think it's Dunsford, her book on positioning. And so that's helping us get clarity around, what the value is, and, who our customers, all the things we've been talking about today. I'm still learning, in other words. It's just like, hey, it's just the first day all over again. The only thing I would say is be careful. Have your processes in place, have a knowledge base. Don't let people come into your organization and leave with knowledge in their head. Get it into your knowledge base. Those are quick lessons that I would share with people if I was starting all over again.
Sammy, thanks for sharing that with us. Those are great words of advice. It sounds like taking care of yourself, making time to recharge, not being afraid to take risk, and reinventing yourself as often as possible to stay relevant is the secret sauce to creating a successful outcome. It's been a pleasure to have you as a guest today. We look forward to maybe having you again in the future and hear some success stories as you grow this. And I want to thank everyone who joined us this week. We had a show every day. We'll be back Monday at 1 p.m. with the recap show. We're going to recap all 3 shows from this week. We'll do it in 10 minutes, I promise. We've been able to do it before. So if you missed any of the shows, come back for the recap. We'll highlight the key points that we discussed. And Carlos, what do we got coming up next week?
Next week, we only have one confirmed interview, Tulio. Unfortunately, I mean, I look forward to more, but confirmed, we have the CEO of Carrot, Gordy Hanrahan. And Carrot is an automated engineering interviewing platform. So that's Carrot. And that's going to be right here, but it's going to be on Thursday. So I still, I don't have confirmation for Tuesday and Wednesday, but please, folks, be on the lookout right here on the Dojo Live website. Thank you.
We'll announce an update on Monday. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Be safe. Hang out with us as we wrap up. Thanks, Sammy.
Thank you. Bye, Sam.